All right, well, we've been in a sermon series called Loved and Accepted. And we kicked the series off, I think, January 18th. And that was my first sermon in this. And so today's going to be a little bit of a continuation of that and of kind of what I've learned on my sabbatical as well that I took in the month of December. So one of the reasons you go on sabbatical is because you feel a lot of these types of things that you see up on this screen right now. If you look at those words, do you relate in your life to any of these words? Busy, burnout, doing too much, drained, frantic, hectic, tired. Just reading those, I'm like, stop. It's just like this oppressive, all these words on us. Do you feel any of those? I hope you don't. But if you are a part of our culture here in America, there's probably a good chance you feel a lot of these things because we sort of live on a treadmill, don't we? Our culture kind of is a treadmill, and you're always keeping up with somebody and something, and it breeds anxiety and fear and all these sorts of things. And so if this is how we often are feeling, then the question, of course, and this is why you're here, right? What is the solution? What is the solution to these things? Jesus is the solution, Babs. Yes, Jesus is the solution. But how do we take that Jesus and actually address the burnout and the fatigue and the tired and the overwhelmed? Well, the solution clearly is to do a sabbatical, right? I mean, right, just if we all just did a sabbatical, I did my sabbatical for the month of December, that's great. This is the continuation of what I learned on my sabbatical. Sabbaticals are good. Vacations are good. I know some that are in Florida right now are enjoying the sun, and vacations are a good solution to feeling burnout and worn out. But neither a vacation or a sabbatical is the solution. And why? Because you always have to what? Come back. You always have to come back from your vacation or from your sabbatical. So what then is the solution? Well, the solution is a sabbatical that is forever. If you know the Sandlot movie, the animation is just barely not working here on our ProPresenter, but a sabbatical forever is the solution. And if you know Sandlot, since we're not getting the gift to work, it is forever. So that's how you can remove all the burnout and stress from your life, is just go on a sabbatical forever. Well, that's kind of heaven, Heaven is like a forever sabbatical. Some would say retirement is the forever sabbatical. I've heard many people that are retired say to me, I'm busier in my retirement than I was when I was working. Well, first off, I don't believe you if you say that. So let me just throw that out there. But it does show, that phrase from a retired person does show that what medical experts call hurry sickness doesn't leave us, even when we are retired. So with this Loved and Accepted series, when we come back from our vacation, we come back from our sabbatical, what are we coming back to? We're coming back to the stresses and demands of our job, the stresses and demands of our life, and that's a very complex, life is many, many things. But even more significantly than the job itself, the life itself, is the automatic patterns in us, right in here, or mostly up in here, of how we approach and respond to those stresses and demands. So we can tweak things about our job and our life, and some of that's in our control, some of it isn't, but the solution isn't in the job. The solution is in here and in here. And sadly, it's not a light switch, and sadly, I know this is why you came today, but it won't all get fixed in one sermon. A sermon cannot fix the automatic patterns that go on in here. Wouldn't you like to think that you choose every action you do? Like, I choose this action, I choose what I'm going to wear, I choose if I turn the light on or off. But what we're going to find is a lot of our actions are automatically programmed into our brain, and we all can relate to that. So we're going to get to that in a minute. Okay, this idea of hurry sickness, it was coined in 1974 by a cardiologist named Meyer Friedman. Hurry sickness is a continuous struggle and unremitting attempt to accomplish or achieve more and more things or participate in more and more events in less and less time. Revive Teens, I know that is one of your blanks just to kind of help you follow along on your roadmap. So if you're feeling hurry sickness, there's no shame. You are not the only one feeling hurry sickness. Like I said, our culture breeds it in us. And in Friedman's theory as a cardiologist, he researched and studied and showed that hurry sickness increases our chance of heart disease. So you can die from hurry sickness is essentially what he concluded. It can literally kill you. But beyond that, I think most of us can attest, it can kill your life satisfaction. To wake up every day and know you'll never get everything done and it's weighing on you and you'll never measure up and there's always more to do and there's always another. Just can't even breathe, just even listing that off. That is not the life of rest. And Jesus saying, my yoke is easy and burden is light, that he calls us to. 10 symptoms of hurry sickness. These are from The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer. Excellent book that I recommend. Take a look at that list. See how many of those you see in your life, or perhaps that your family members or coworkers can see in your life. Irritability, hypersensitivity, restlessness, workaholism, emotional numbness, out-of-order priorities, lack of care for your body, escapist behaviors, slippage of spiritual disciplines, isolation. Perhaps all 10 of those apply to you. There's no shame in that. Our culture breeds this in us. We're like a baby fish born into this ocean, and we grow up in it, and this is our ocean, hurry sickness. So we're going to put you back in your discussion groups. Mosaic regulars, you know the drill. So this is our chance to kind of get our mind turning a little bit about this message. You don't have to know anything about the Bible to be able to answer these questions. Number one, what are the cultural causes of hurry sickness? So, like, what are the things in our culture that crank up the treadmill? And if you feel comfortable, you don't have to. You can share where you see hurry sickness in your life. Number two, why is it difficult to say no to people asking you to do something, to attend something, to join something, or to help with something? Particularly if it's something good, but you don't have space on your plate for it. Why is it hard to say no to that? So get back in your groups. We'll give you a 5-minute timer, and then we'll come back up to finish the sermon. All right, at this time, you can turn your attention back this way. Bring your chairs back this way. So back on January 18th, when we kicked this sermon off, the sermon series off, this was what the whole sermon was about, was this slide here. So you can go back and listen to that sermon online if you missed it. But a quick recap, we have the end of Matthew 3. This is Matthew 3, verses 16 and 17 at the top that lead into Matthew 4. So Jesus has these two very contrasting conversations. One is with God the Father, one is with Satan. And it's very interesting back-to-back that Matthew gives us. So God the Father says to Jesus, "This is my Son, whom I love, with him I'm well pleased." The very next scene is Satan saying to Jesus, "If you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread. If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down from the top of the temple." And the question in that sermon was, will you listen to the is or to the if? God says, you're my son, you're my daughter, you're my child, I love you, you're valuable, you're accepted, you're whole, you're precious, you're approved, you're safe, you're secure because you're my child. I've done it all for you. You can't even change it if you wanted to. You can't make yourself more loved by God, more valuable than you already are. You are set in where your value comes from. Satan then comes along and says in your ear, pss, 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 whispers the if statement. If you had blank, then you would be valuable. If you had blank, then you would be approved, accepted, loved. This is the daily if that he gives all of us, that Satan gives all of us. And so since January 18th, I know, because it was such a great sermon, that all of you have been listening to the is ever since. That you've never once had an issue with the if. I haven't, no. No. Clearly, we have issues with the if. Our goal in our walk with Jesus is to live in the is. And the is what is true. But we live in a world fueled by ifs. That these ifs actually mold our brains' neural pathways. And so what I mean by that, think of neural pathways. By the way, this is a real brain scan on the right. I don't know what all that stuff means, but that's amazing that all that stuff is in our brain and they can scan it and see. But our brain is made up of neural pathways, and neural pathways work like a forest. If you look at the left side of this forest, you see all that tall brush, all that green. You don't want to walk in that stuff, do you? The path has been cleared. How? Because somebody, long time ago, decided, I'm going to walk on that green stuff. And then someone else walked on the green stuff, and someone else walked on the green stuff. And the more that happened, the path started to be visible and clear. And the way a path in the woods is made and the way your brain creates a path is the first time you walk that way, you have to push through the brush. But when you walk that path of your brain 100 times, there's a clear path. And if you walk it daily, it becomes a road you automatically take. So your brain is doing things automatically that you might think, I have full choice in this, but I would question, do you? Do I? Why does Paul say in Romans 7, I don't do the things I want to do, and I do the things I don't want to do, right? We all can relate to that Romans 7. So these neural pathways are formed every time you think a thought, every time you feel an emotion, react to stress, or perform a habit, and this is actually how habits are formed, it strengthens that route to where it becomes automatic or involuntary. So do you see how this relates to our spiritual formation? That here on the right, where the path has been paved, we have these if statements, and these if statements, what I mean by this is, with these if statements, let's say you're in your life and you have a need for safety, or a need for comfort, then or a need for validation, approval, that you feel, your brain feels the need and says, I have to get this need met. And if that path has been paved by these if statements, if you had more friends, if you were more popular, if you had a relationship, if you had a better relationship, if your marriage was better, if your spouse was this way, if you're single, if you were married, if this hadn't happened in your past, if this was to be about the true about your future, if you made this amount of money, we've all dealt with all of those if statements, right? And those things, the reason our brain is going down those paths is because if we attain a feeling that something can give us, or if we can't get the thing, then perhaps it's pornography, or perhaps it's a drug, or perhaps it's getting drunk, or perhaps it's vegging out on screens all day. There's something that our brain finds that meets that need for safety. It doesn't solve the need, but it masks the pain, right? It masks it, and eventually that becomes automatic. When I feel insecure, whoom, my brain goes here. Like, why can't I make it? Stop going here. Because the path has been paved, and often paved by these if statements. Now, if you were to look at that photo on the left, and you're approaching the forest, and I said, which path are you going to walk down? The one on the left, the is path, or the one on the right? We're all going down the one on the right, right? Because if you try to walk through that brush that has never been cleared, it's going to be hard, it's going to be itchy, it's going to scratch you. There's going to be thorns and briars, probably some snakes and little critters in there. Like, I don't need any of that stuff. I'm going down the path that's already been paved. It's not worth it to go down the other path. So Romans 12 is really our passage for today, just these two verses where Paul says, and these might be familiar to you, they might not be, but commonly used when it's how do we follow Jesus? How does our life change, our behavior change, our thoughts change? It says, therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. So we see this conflict of conforming either to the world or patterns or to God's patterns. Now, if you don't know what conforming is, talk to our Revive teens, talk to a middle schooler, and remember back to your middle school days. Conforming was, if everybody's wearing the Nike swoosh, and back in my middle school days, if I'm wearing the Reebok, whatever the thing was, then I'm not cool, and they are. So I'd better get me a Nike swoosh. A couple years ago, every kid had a Stanley water bottle. You had to have one to be cool. And then a year later, you had to have an Owala water bottle to be cool. And you had to switch it out. And if you didn't, it's this constant chasing that somebody somewhere on TikTok or YouTube says, hey, everybody, jump. And then you go, well, they just jumped and they're an influencer, so I have to jump. And we could, as older folks that aren't influenced by influencers, we say, well, that's silly. It's just some random person with a phone telling you what to do. That's the same thing that we do in our lives. It's just other silly if statements that that Satan brings along to us. So conforming is when we feel like we have to become like everyone else. Why do we do it? Why do we conform? To be safe, to be accepted, to feel like we're loved, to feel like we're not insecure. We'll do anything to feel safe, to feel accepted, to feel like we're loved. Now, sometimes we want to conform to God's will, but our behavior just won't do it. Like, I want to do this God's way, but I can't. Other times, we don't want to do it God's way. We're like, whatever, the world's way is better. And we can go down a list where each of us as Christ followers or as potential Christ followers has to ask, am I conforming to the pattern of the world or of God's will? When it comes to sex, am I seeing God's design that sex is meant for marriage only, that is the covenant bond that God created for sex, not before marriage, not pornography, not outside of marriage, not even lust and fantasy and working through these things, that I'm willing to say, I'm going to sacrifice what maybe my brain pattern wants, because it's been developed in this way, or the world's told me it's normal, very normal in our world, to not live according to God's design. A lot of Christians say, I love the Jesus thing, I love that grace thing, but when it comes to sex, I'm going to kind of do what I want. I'm going to compartmentalize those two things. When it comes to money, do we look at God's design for money and say, okay, I'm going to not get myself in a lot of debt, if I can help that. I'm going to be generous. I'm going to help the poor. I'm going to help my church. I'm going to not be greedy. I'm going to not, kind of keep up with the rat race of society that I have to have. Or am I like, what, I like the Jesus grace thing, but I'm going to kind of do whatever I want with my money, and or whatever my neighbors are doing, whatever my culture's doing, I'm just going to sort of keep up with them. We could go down the line, how we treat the vulnerable and the oppressed, the people we love and how we love them, how we approach politics, and if we're just out there to win and to beat the other side and caring nothing about actual people. These are patterns in our culture that become automatic in us because we've conformed to the pattern of the world. So I just want to take a moment for us to be able to sit in that and say, for you, as a follower of Jesus or a potential follower of Jesus, have I sacrificed these areas to God as my true and proper act of worship? Worship comes from the word worthy. He's worthy of our praise. Amen, LaRonda? He's worthy of our joyful noise. And he's worthy of us bowing the knee when it comes to sex, money, the vulnerable, love, politics, of how we approach all of these things. Even though I will lose out, you're worthy, God, of what I'm going to sacrifice in this and surrender to you. Now, these things don't happen overnight. It's a lifetime of growing in this. But the point I want to make is that word pattern. that there's automatic patterns in us that our brain creates. It creates that path. And when we come back to this word cloud that we did earlier, and back to your discussion questions, burnout, busy, tired, hectic, fatigue, the reason that we keep saying yes, have you ever wondered that? Why do I keep saying yes? And I know all the good slogans, saying no to something is saying yes to something else, or saying yes to something is saying no to something. And I can read the books, and I've read John Mark Comer's book, and it's good stuff. But I still struggle with having too much on my plate and saying yes, and my sabbatical was a really good time to reflect through this. But why is it that we keep saying yes and adding more to our overflowing plates? Because there are deeply rooted pathways in us and patterns that have become automatic that keep us saying yes. And it's rooted in people-pleasing. And I am plagued with people-pleasing. Many of us are plagued with people-pleasing, which comes from a very good place, but it's attempting to meet a need very similarly to that addictive drug, or very similarly to a struggle with sexual sin. And so back to where this metaphor started, the if statement in the forest, that when it comes to our burnout, our overwhelm, our being so busy, the if statement on the right was, if you had blank, you would be valuable. So when that clears that path of how to be valuable. So while it is true of those things we listed, including career advancement, status, title, could be social media, it could be your popularity in middle school or high school, it also explains why we can't stop doing things even though we want to. Your brain is hungry, it knows to eat food. So your brain is hungry for something, and it knows to go down this pathway. But did you notice that none of it ever stops? When you're at A and you need to get to B, you get to B. And what happens next? You're at B, you need to get to C. And you're at C, and now you need to get to D. And it never, once you get to Z, you think, I made it. No, it goes back to A again, or AA, right? It never stops. It's a cup with no bottom. Picture this coffee cup if there were holes in the bottom, which would be sad. This is my Ninja Turtle mug, and I've broken my other ones. I'm going to pray God's blessing over this one. But I could pour as much coffee as I want into the cup. If there's a hole in the bottom, it's just going to keep pouring out and becoming empty. That's how Satan's deceptions work. So, how does this apply to why we can't say no to people? Because if you had fill in the blank on the screen, what the blank is this person's approval when you say yes. If you say yes, they approve of you. They say you're a good person. They say you're a helpful person. This is very subtle. It can be your emails and texts. I can't keep up with my emails and my texts, and so people will think that I don't care about them. They'll think that I'm lazy. If people ask you to do something and you say no, they might think you're not a good Christian. They might think you're a bad person. They might think you're selfish, and that never stops. Because if you say yes, I'll help you, guess what? Next week, they call you for help again, and then call you for help again. Or maybe you help them, and somebody else calls you for. There's always someone that needs help, right? And if we're always saying yes to everyone, eventually we get back to that cloud up on the top right. And why this applies to being loved and accepted is because this involuntary engine in us, it's this core fear that's often thrust upon us when we're children that we have to prove that we are good in others' eyes. We have to earn that we are good in others' eyes. And if this other person or people think I'm good, then I'm good. It's true that I'm good. And if they think I'm bad, then I'm bad. Then it's true that I'm bad. And we are letting other people determine our value and identity. Remember Satan? If you're the Son of God? Who is Satan to determine Jesus' value? Who is the person asking you to do the next thing to determine your value? So back to that first sermon, and I'm gonna wrap up here in a moment, and we're going to do a spiritual exercise of living in this first sermon truth that we did back on January 18th. Jesus was anchored in God the Father's love for him. That forest path was cleared by God the Father meeting his needs. Jesus had needs for safety and approval. He met them with God the Father. He went to God regularly, sat with God in stillness, up on the mountainside to pray. Early in the morning, he got away. The crowd wanted him to do more. He said, I can't do more for the crowd. You are not the one that determines my value. And he went back to his relationship with God to determine that. I want you to think about, I have a line in here that I want to get to for our teens, because I know it's on your sheet, and this will help me make sure we have time to get Debbie up here to do this spiritual practice. When it's somewhere, I'll get to it eventually. But what Satan wants us to think is, and what anxiety does to us is that every single second of every day, we are on trial. So picture a courtroom and you're on trial, and or you can go with the metaphor of an election. Every single second of every day, there's an election happening. You're running for office, and there's votes being taken. And the votes are you valuable? Are you acceptable? And it's really bad in school because it literally feels that way, right? If I get enough people to think I'm okay because I wore the swoosh, or I have the Owala, or I did this or that, then I am actually valuable. It's the same in our adult lives, often just in more subtle and deeper and more invisible ways. So what would that be like for your value to be determined every day by the 100 people that you see throughout your day? They get to take a vote. You're good or you're bad, and at the end of the day, you hope you got at least 51% of them to say you were good. Then you're good. Whew, you made it. And then start over the next day. This is what our anxiety does to us. So Jesus had this message, this is my son whom I love, with I'm well pleased. That's the message that his path was created with. Now, what we're going to do to close out the sermon, and which will lead us into communion and into our worship, is an actual practice. I have this over on the left, the new path we're trying to form of the is to be still and know that God is God, and you are his beloved child. I can tell you that 100 times a day. I can preach it. I can tell myself that. I have to experience it. I have to walk that path and let God speak it to me. And I can't do it when my TV's on. I can't do it when my phone is on. It helps when Pastor Debbie is around and can lead me in a spiritual practice to do that. But it helps when we can do this in structured ways to learn how to do it in our daily time with the Lord. But what we are doing is creating a new path in our brain when that need for safety, validation, security comes. Am I loved? Am I valuable? Instead of going down the path of I need to say yes to everyone so that I am, or the path of whatever sin struggle we're struggling with, or the path of anxiety, the new path has been formed. I know who I am, just the way that Jesus did. So Pastor Debbie is going to come on up. Teens for Revive, you guys can head back to Revive. And we have Psalm 46 will be up here on the screen. We'll go back to... Alan, go back to the full psalm.
We know the phrase, be still and know that I am God, right? Everybody knows that. So I want to give a little bit of reflection on this whole psalm, even though we're not going to read it through out loud. I want you to recognize this psalm contains lovely images of strength and rivers that make glad in the city of God, but there's also much turmoil. Nouns like trouble, fear, wars, desolation, verbs like burns, roar, shatters, breaks, images of earthquakes and floods, crumbling mountains, violent upheaval among nations, not the context we usually think of for be still and know that I am God, right? The context for the declaration that God is our refuge and strength, our ever-present help, is not a time of victory. This is a time when everything is going kablooey. It's a time of war and uncertainty. And it is not in our warfare that we find God. That is the point of this psalm. We find God in our stillness before God in the midst of turmoil. The words "be still" were translated "cease striving" in earlier translations of the Bible, and I think "cease striving" in some ways gets at the intent of this verse even more profoundly than our modern translations. We imagine that our efforts, as Noah was saying, we think that our efforts are what bring forth peace and knowledge of God. We think that God is dependent upon us. But God says, stop striving. Stop working so hard. Lay down your weapons, and in that stillness and surrender, then you can know that I am God. Then you can know that I am the lifeblood of the city of refuge. Then you can know that I am the one who ends the wars and does away with our instruments of war. Then you can know that I am your fortress, your safe place, like Noah was talking about, the place of quiet rest. Then you can know that I am God. God says this to us. You are not God. I am not God. Our churches are not God. If we do not submit in stillness daily, I think, in stillness daily to the goodness of God, then we'll eventually simply become part of the turmoil rather than agents of his peace. So with these words in mind, I invite you to enter a time of guided silent prayer. So get comfortable. For me, that usually means sitting straight up so that no part of my body is holding any extra weight, feet flat on the floor. Try to have as little stress on your body as possible. I invite you to close your eyes so you can focus on God and not on me and not on your neighbor. Once again, orient yourself to the God who knows you and desires to be known by you. Just take a moment to think about that. God knows you and wants to be known by you. Now receive these words from God and repeat them in the quietness of your heart. Mull them over in your spirit. God speaking, be still and know that I am God. Receive these words from God. Be still and know that I am. Receive these words from God. Be still and know. Receive these words from God. Be still. Receive this word from God. Be. God's highest calling on our lives is not doing, but being. Our doing flows out of being. Our calling flows out of being. You will know what to say yes to if you are being. in the presence of God, being still in the presence of God. Be still and know that He is God. And remaining in this quiet space for a few more moments, note in your spirit how God is inviting you to be still, to be known by Him, and to know Him. How God is inviting you to enter into deeper intimacy with Him. Amen.